Welcome, everybody, to a different kind of show today, the Raad Life After Hours. It's about 11 o'clock almost on Pacific side of the United States, and we are still sequestered. And it looks like we're going to be sequestered until at least the end of April. So we're getting creative in how we spend our time. And the gentleman I have in front of me here on the screen is actually nowhere close to the west coast of the United States. He's way, way, way on the other side of the world. Trent, say hello.
G'day.
Good day, Trent. So we were just, Trent and I basically have been doing this informally for a while. We do it mostly on LinkedIn, and we are basically constantly exchanging some ideas. We've both been kind of in the industry long enough to I don't know where the bodies are buried and how things are done, and right. And so we thought we would basically share something that usually happens in the hospitality industry a lot. In my experience, 20 years, I don't know, Trent, if you agree with me, but a lot of times the best conversations to be had are not the ones at the meetings. They're not the ones at the the design charrettes. Those are very focused on a particular thing. The conversations that really sometimes are the most meaningful are the ones that happen after, at the lobby bar, at the lobby lounge, right? So we thought we would basically have a little bit of a, experiential interview today or conversation.
Well, the only problem with that is that it's still lunchtime in my part of the world. Now, I've bought the bottle just in case. We might need to have one of those Mad Men moments where we have a brief cocktail over lunch, or I might need to fill it up with ginger ale, perhaps.
Well, don't let me pressure you.
I'm with you in spirit.
Oh, very good, very good. So one of the things that we usually engages us in conversation is Trent has been doing a podcast on LinkedIn. He intended it to be 365 podcasts only, right? 1 year worth of podcasts. What is the podcast title, Trent?
Funnily enough, I called it Trent 365 because that was purely the intention. Go for 1 year, every day, a short episode, just a daily burst of an idea, a thought, or something that sort of hit me just every day for 365 days. That was the intent.
So here's something I never asked you. What was the impetus for it? Like, was there a moment, like, I don't know, it was the 1st of January and I needed to make a resolution list or something? Like, was there something that caused you to say, okay, I'm going to do this? Because you've been in this industry a long time. You've been connected a long time. But to actually journal almost like this, to share openly like this, and you have a very poignant way, and it's very short and succinct, but it's poignant. It's thought-provoking. It causes people to, maybe you could almost say you're a disruptor a little bit, right? In a good way. So what was it that caused you to take that step to set up Trent 365?
It's interesting. I don't think there was any one specific moment. I mean, I think probably because we're now up to today will be episode 852. So it's been going 2.5 years now, every day for the last 852 days. And I guess the inspiration to get started on producing content is really where it started. And that was an inspiration built from too many people, I think, within the industry. And for me, that's hotels and spas. I mean, I'm a hotel guy who fell into the spa business. Mm-hmm. And the first probably 13, 14 years of my life was in hotel land. And then for the last 15 years of my life, it's been in hotel spa land.
And for people who don't know you, Trent, when you say you're in that space, in what capacity are you in that space? If you can share that.
We, the company is Mandara Spa. We run spas in hotels, like we're a spa management company. Yeah. My role in that is as a senior VP of the international division, which means I basically oversee everything that is land-based, so hotels and resorts outside of the US, which for me is 55, well, going into this thing, was 45 spas over 11 countries, basically. Wow. And I think, back to the inspiration point, it was just that so many, I mean, going to all these conferences, going to these events, talking to all these people, reading all the stuff that was in the blogs, online, in the magazine articles, too much of it I didn't feel was really speaking to what the reality was that I was seeing on the ground. And I just felt that there was nowhere that I could go to find the content that was in my head. Yet when I spoke to people offline, as you said, after hours, in the hallways, in the bars, in the lobby lounges at these events, everyone was on the same page, but they didn't really feel they had the cover necessarily to be able to say it. And so I thought, if I can find a way to say what I need to say, which is my truth and my reality, I'm not making anything up, then that maybe gives other people a bit of a cover to go and join the conversation. And, you know, to your point, the intent was not ever to basically preach my answer or preach my reality. It was more a case of questioning where we're at and questioning the status quo. And I think it's funny, as I've really started doing this, I've had lots of these little chats with various people, and I've worked out that that's actually something I'm pretty good at. Someone said to me the other day, he said, "You're the great butt guy." And he wasn't referring to my bum, but what he was referring to was that I'm pretty good at saying, well, that's great, but what about this? What about that? What about the other angle? So that's kind of where the inspiration started. And the audio side of that was just an extension. This started as an audio only show. And then after 108 episodes, I think it was, I decided now I've got to start getting comfortable in the video thing. And so now it's just literally a video with the iPhone every day. I strip out the various content and just publish on the various places. It's a real simple process. And to me, everyone should be doing it. It's storytelling at the basic level, right? That's all it is.
You know, I didn't even think about it because, I mean, you know, I've been doing this probably I'm in year 5 now for the Raad Life, right? And we do it about once a week. And it's, you know, I never really wanted to cut it short. I know everybody says, oh, you know, you got to get it shorter. You got to get it shorter. Yours is pretty succinct and short. Mine tends to be, you know, anywhere between 30 minutes and an hour, maybe sometimes it overruns, right? There's a part of it that I didn't even realize until I started doing the show, that we as a society, we only get together on agendas and to-do lists and things like that in general. Now, in the hospitality industry, we're lucky. We've always had this sort of layer of after hour, this layer of, you know, just gathering, if you will. But also, to your point, I think there has been a kind of hold the line, don't talk out of school kind of thing on some stuff in those social environments, which is unfortunate because there are genuine things in our industry that I think we really need to look at, and maybe you and I have talked about this week, you know, about the fact that maybe this is an opportunity with coronavirus, like the fact that we are facing the challenges that we're facing. Not that we probably were not going to do that with a supposed incoming recession. Like, we were going to probably have some economic pains anyway.
Sure.
But this basically took it onto a steroid-infused level. I mean, this is, and in your case, I mean, you were sharing with me a couple of days ago, you know, there's nowhere to duck and cover. You know, before we had an economic meltdown in Asia, there was still health in Europe. You know, you were running 45 properties. 1 or 2 countries are impacted. You still have all the other countries to kind of shoulder the burden a little bit and buffer the impact. This is global, and this is like I was talking to a friend of mine who is a client, and his family is in Ecuador. Ecuador, they are arresting people if they step out of their house. Yeah, and his mother actually has the coronavirus. And she's got diabetes, and so, you know, he's here, he can't really do much, and he spent like pretty much the whole weekend and today trying to just figure out something, like get the guard. It's not a safe country either. Like, get the guard back into the compound of the house, make sure nobody, you know, when the mother's, you know, they're running around trying to find a place for her. So there is no duck and cover.
No, you're right.
Right. And in our industry, it's not the only industry, but our industry is more or less a luxury product. It's a discretionary spending. It is not, my life is dependent on this. I have coronavirus. Get me to a spa. That's not what you're going to hear anytime soon here, right? As much as we say wellness. So you and I have had some interesting conversations, and I thought it would be kind of cool to bring this to people's attention in this format, and then also maybe open it up later on and invite people to maybe share some of their thoughts when we post this. And I'll say it right now, one of the things we're thinking about is, if there is an interest, we may actually, you know, open up the Raad Life After Hours Lounge to some people and have them come and join us in, you know, a 2.0 version of this down the road here. I mean, heck, we're going to be sitting around doing very little, unfortunately, until the end of April at least. And I have a distinct feeling that it might actually be longer than the end of April. You know, that might be Yeah, go ahead.
Just to give you some context, we're on day 14 of the lockdown here. This is hence this. I made a commitment 2 weeks ago when this started. I said, I'm going to not shave for these 2 weeks of the lockdown. That's my little protest at the world, that little bit of discomfort, that little itchy feeling that'll remind me that the world is pretty messed up. And that's when I thought it was only going to be 2 weeks. We've just been told we're down for another 2 weeks. And there's a talk about extending it even beyond that. So realistically, I don't see anywhere going into lockdown properly anything less than a month. And I think it's probably more. And I think those changes are going to live a lot longer.
I will welcome you to the Beard Club, in open arms in about 2 weeks, right? So, I mean, you could say, I've been ready for coronavirus for the last.
There you go. You've been prepping. You're a prepper.
I'm ready. But yeah, and so let's start this conversation. One of the things that you one time posted about was what you titled windows and mirrors.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So what is windows and mirrors? I mean, I know it's got to do with something with looking through, looking inwards, whatever. But what is windows and mirrors? What was that all about?
Well, and I guess it goes back to the original inspiration of what this content journey was all about for me. It was, we often say at a time of reflection or at a time of crisis or at a time of problems, you need to take a long, hard look at yourself in the mirror. Mum used to say it all the time. And that's great, but to me, that only gives you one angle. That gives you your angle. It's your perception. There's a reason most men don't look in the mirror, and I think that's because we don't like what's looking back at us. Whereas I think what we need to do as an industry, and again, it's sort of hotel spa combined in my world. Mm-hmm. To me, it's a case of looking outside your own bubble, looking outside your own window. Instead of looking in the mirror, look out the window and just see what's going on out there. And that's where I think you start to get the real interesting stuff. And I think that's where the real innovation comes from, is when you start looking at how stuff happens in other industries. I mean, what is the transport industry doing at a time like this? What is the food and beverage industry doing at a time like this? What is the construction industry doing? Look at every single industry, look at their best practices, worst practices, see what applies to you. And I think it's that looking out window. There's two things you get. When you look out the window, you get to see what other people are doing. Yeah. And you also get to see the reaction to what you're doing. Because when you're looking in the mirror, and when I say what other people are reacting to, looking in the mirror is what you do when you go to your conferences and events, because you're living in a self-fulfilling prophecy world, right?
You're preaching to your own bubble.
It's like-minded people. Yeah. And so we go to these events and vacuum cleaners are the most important thing in the world. Sure. Right. Until you walk outside and realize vacuum cleaners aren't. Mm-hmm. And it's the same for spas especially, and I think every industry, there's nothing different there. But I think when you start looking out the window, you start to, number one, see what other people are doing, and number two, see how those other people outside of your bubble are reacting to what you're doing. And so that, to me, gives you a real sense of where the opportunities lie.
So why do you think there's a sort of a resistance? Is it just a human nature resistance that we have for this? Like you said, you don't want to look at yourself in the mirror, kind of thing. That sort of brutal, brutal inventory taking. That there's nobody else that you're fooling. You're looking at yourself. Correct. In the mirror.
And look, I think that's exactly what it is. And there's nowhere to hide, as you pointed out earlier. In this time, there's nowhere to hide for people. And a lot of people have been living on the gravy train for a while in their businesses, in their industries, in their sectors. Mm-hmm. And, it's not like with a spa. I mean, there was a boom. Spas in hotels have only been around 25 years, which some of the younger kids listening to this show wouldn't understand. Mm-hmm. In fact, I was having this conversation with some people here in my building that were on lockdown the other day. And they said, they looked at me with amazement. You said, what do you mean? Like they weren't around. The hotels have always had spas. And these guys are in their 30s.
I've shared this with you. My very first spa project was the second Givenchy spa anywhere in the world. The first mm-hmm. one was in Mission Hills in the desert here in California. And then the second one was the insertion of a Givenchy spa during the renovation of the Saint Laurent Hotel that was owned by Sun International at the time, which is now the one and only. And I believe it was one of the first few properties that Sol Kerzner, who just recently passed last week, had purchased, and he was remodeling it. And they were putting a spa in there. And I always refer to my engagement in the spa industry as being there the day that the sign changed from hotel and casino,
Yeah.
where the word casino came down and the word spa went up, literally, physically in front of my own eyes. And you're right. People don't have necessarily that perspective. And that was about 1998. So you're smack on. You're like 20 years plus or minus. And that was a totally different business model.
Yeah.
Like that was I mean, I don't know if I'm correct in remembering, but that was the same way you gave green fees away for golf, you gave away treatments. It was for you to get group business. It was an amenity extension of the hotel. And boy, is it a different world right now, or before this happened.
Yeah, look, and that's the thing I think important. It's important to remember that the conversation that I'm having is one that I've been having for a few years now. And this current crisis is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a world that was already, in my mind at least, needed some serious questioning well before this. And this is going to, I think, force a lot of people into action, because to your point about why people don't want to look and why people don't want to ask the questions, I think it is the insecurity, it's the unknown. I mean, I remember a few years ago, in fact, I just heard today, the London XL Conference Centre, where they have big conventions and expos, where they had a big professional beauty and wellness summit a few years ago. Mm-hmm. I remember sitting around a group of spa managers doing a little presentation, and I said, you realize that 99%, up to 99% of the guests in your hotel don't actually care what you do. Mm-hmm. Because, and they looked at me like, why? I said, well, the capture rate, the percentage of guests in your hotel, in a city hotel in London, and let's be honest, most countries around the world, is going to be 1, 2, 3%. Mm-hmm. So anywhere from 97 to 99% of the guests in that hotel don't use the spa or don't care about it enough to go down and use it. Right. So therefore you're irrelevant to 99% of the crowd. Yeah. And one girl put up a hand and said, but hang on, you're talking us out of a job. And I mean, obviously my response was, I'm not talking you out of a job, but the market is. If you don't want to listen, it's up to you. But that was the point where people have got to. They've built their industry, their career around this, and that's great. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of excess around it. There's a lot of excess treatment rooms. There's a lot of excess therapies. There's a lot of excess therapists around. I mean, people keep saying there's a massive shortage of labor in this industry, which I find interesting, because I think in most cases, and there are some exceptions, absolutely, but I think overall, most sort of 4-star, 5-star city type properties, and even the majority of the resort type properties, they're actually not running anywhere near capacity, either capacity of labor or capacity of building and structure.
So what do you account, because we've experienced a ridiculous, in my book, with my previous head of economics degree and a master's in marketing, a ridiculous growth in the hospitality industry, and just in terms of number of properties, number mm-hmm. of rooms that go on the market. It's almost like, it reminds me of the Middle East when they were building Dubai and they were building Abu Dhabi, and it was like the braggability was that you were building a high tower with yep. full service apartments and all this bells and whistles, and the fact that you may not have the ability to fill it was mm-hmm. secondary to the claim that you were involved in building it. And so, before this happened, it was always fascinating to me. Like, I never understood, like, okay, we're coming out with a new brand every month, a sub-brand. I mean, number one rule of engagement is do not dilute your brand. I don't know how you don't dilute your brand if you're going to come up with 12 brands in a course of a year that are under an umbrella of a bigger brand. I mean, it doesn't really matter if it's the red box or the blue box or the green box, right? And if you're not going to fill them, then why are we building them? Well, because there's fees involved, right? There's money to be made in management. There's all that stuff. I mean,
and look, I mean, I think there's a part of, and this is particularly relevant, I think, when it comes to spas as well. It's build it and they will come. Kevin Costner, Field of Dreams, there's that great line where he's building the baseball pit stadium out in his field in his cornyard, right? And the voice says, if you build it, they will come. And that's what happened with spas. We took what was originally a resort type model, which was there, to your point, in Mauritius, these kind of resorty type properties where people are leisurely, enjoying themselves. Great. But then we squeezed that into a box and said, let's put that in every hotel in the world, because it was a USP.
Well, and it's a different model. Like those properties we were talking about, like on the Mauritius, those are like a week, 10 days, 2-week average stay. This is hand somebody a script, put them on a private plane and send them over to read it in a private presidential villa over 2 weeks. So it's definitely not a inner city property. And yet you're right. It's like, wait a minute, we can't be a hotel unless we have a spa.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've seen new properties that were built in the last 5 to 10 years, 5 years, not or less, that have a spa.
Yep.
These are nice properties on coastal, and I'm not going to name any, but that have a spa. And that spa is technically 2 or 3 massage rooms and a waiting room that looks like a doctor's office. I mean, in order to just say you have a spa. It reminds me of the days when every hotel said, we need to have a 3-meal restaurant.
Yep.
And we need to have a lobby bar. And then they started losing money, and then all the hotels started bringing in daily grill or whatever to operate their 3-meal restaurants. Remember?
Yeah. And I think that's what's going to change out of this, because people are going to be realizing that, and look, it's like I talked about in one of the very early episodes of this show, the lesson that we learned from food trucks, because I realized that our business is so labor intensive. Hotels and spas are a labor intensive industry.
Yeah.
And we've always got that overhead. Even if you've got daily workers and casual staff and whatever you call them, it's still a very labor intense issue, a labor intense industry. And I started to think about, again, to the point of looking out the window, what business models out there make sense? What business model gets the balance between demand and supply right? Because the way I looked at it is hotels and spas have been built supply first. They haven't been built demand first.
Demand first, yeah.
And
that's a good point.
That's to the point of build it and they will come, right? And food trucks get it right. When the demand is there, they're there. When they're not, they're closed. And so, I think one of the things certainly that's coming out of this in terms of spas in the very near future, as soon as we open the doors, is at the very least, we go back to limited hours. This idea of 10 till 10 in the hotel is not going to work for the current model of spa.
Right.
Don't even get me started on what the current model of spa doesn't achieve, because that's got to be completely blown up. To me,
well, I do plan to get you started on that. but
look, I mean,
you do raise an interesting point, because I had a client that actually, when the economy tanked last time, he actually ran a business in a food truck, and it was Baja style tacos and shrimp and all this stuff, right?
Yep.
When the market turned and got better, he actually opened a small restaurant. Right. And at the beginning, he was about ready to abandon the food truck.
Yep.
Right. You can see where that he had his finger on the pulse, and then he fell into the trappings of the brick and mortar versus the agility of a fast moving. There's no demand here. Literally, I put the key in the ignition and I drive to the other side of town and find the demand. You literally go fishing for the demand, right?
Yep.
And he almost did that. And the reason why he shared that with me is because it's kind of ironic. He was dependent on 1 or 2 people only to get the truck out of the yard, to pick up the supply, right? So everything has its own issues. But to your point, if you take the traditional, or what we call a normal operation of a spa or a hotel, and you compare that to a restaurant, and then you say, but wait a minute, here's in the restaurant business, there's this thing called food trucks. Where's the equivalent of that kind of thinking in our industry? And it's funny because it's kind of happening. You've got Uber style on-demand massage, right? And I will admit it, I use Soothe all the time, right? And that service has just gotten better and better over the last 3 or 4 years that it's been in operation. It went from potluck. You decide you're going to have a massage, and who knows who you're going to get.
Yeah.
to where now they have a membership model. You can rebook a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
You can order certain things for your home. I mean, it has evolved into a more sophisticated offering. But at the end of the day, it has a totally different labor model. It has a totally different overhead and fixed cost model.
Yeah.
Right. And I keep telling people in brick and mortar, I said, if you're not considering that this is a legitimate competition, and that you are at least offering maybe a hybrid version of this for your select elite clients, then you're gonna lose this, right? And what's funny is some of these big players in my area, when I have shared that with them, it still was either uncomfortable thing for them to step outside that comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
They excused it with all kinds of stuff, liability and all this stuff. And I'm thinking, okay, but here's a company that has figured out the formula.
Yep.
And you're losing business to them, and you're still stagnating in your pool. I don't want to use the clean the swamp metaphor, because
right.
I think yeah,
it means something different.
It's probably a little insensitive at this point to do that, but okay. But let's talk about that a little bit. I mean, the food truck thing is great, right? And so when you decided to look out the window, Trent, what else did you see?
Mm-hmm. What I saw, I guess, was people who get the balance right between wants and needs. And, to your point earlier, we're not selling a need, we're selling a want. We're selling an optional choice, an optional purchase. And I think at any times when things are tight, certainly now, right now spas and hotels are closed anyway in a lot of our countries. Certainly the spas are. Mm-hmm. And so you don't have a choice of going to a spa even if you wanted to. But even once things open up again, are people going to have the disposable income to go to a hotel spa? Are they even going to have a disposable income to go to a hotel? I don't see a lot of people going on holidays after this is over. And if they are, they're going fairly regional, not even long range domestic. They're going very local.
But it's not even, I don't even think it's a money thing, by the way. I think what we're also going to experience this, I mean, technically we are going to be 6 weeks, in some cases 7 to 8 weeks maybe, that people have been sequestered by the time the end of April comes. Okay. There's an old adage that says any behavior or change of behavior that goes on for 30 days becomes a new habit.
Right.
Right. So what you're saying is there's this sort of financial money aspect that will basically change behavior, because I mean, gosh, I mean, there are people that didn't even survive 48 hours of this shutdown and lost their jobs, right? I mean, that's unheard of. I've never in my life seen something move that fast.
Yeah.
Okay? I mean, I think the layoffs and the furloughs spread faster than the coronavirus. Honestly, I mean, it's like,
right.
And yes, I think maybe part of it was that people realized there was a recession on its way, and they kind of maybe took advantage of the fact, and I don't mean in a bad way when I say advantage, they took advantage of the fact that this was happening to basically transition themselves. But there's also another factor. The factor is that our changed behavior patterns now mean that the way we look at time and quality differently. And so even though we may have the money, we may not put the value on time and quality of services the same way we used to before.
Yeah, there's that. And there's also the angle that I think time, everyone's always been saying anything that you can create that helps me save time is going to be a valuable business. That's why Uber works, because Uber sells time. That's why these, Grab Eats and all these delivery services, they all work because they help you save time.
Right.
But here's the thing. When I was able to get out of my apartment the other day to go to the supermarket, it was a 3-hour experience. Now, time didn't matter at that point in time. The only thing that mattered was making sure you got in.
And the quality of what you got.
And the quality of what you got. So I think that's the other flip side of this, is that we've always been focused on we need more time, we're running out of time. Shit, we've got nothing but time at the moment for a lot of people. And so I think that whole dynamic is going to shift. It's convenience now that, like in Malaysia, we cannot go out to a restaurant like a lot of places, but the restaurants can deliver.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's a convenience item. It's also a necessity now, but it's a convenience.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be that you would deliver your Uber Eats because it saved you time.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about time now. It's just
It's about convenience.
convenience. So that's going to flip the model a bit as well, I think.
Well, what do you think? What do you think? I mean, the other aspect of it is, and you and I have talked about this, is some people may decide not to go to work in the same fashion and way that they used to work.
Yeah.
Meaning that, they may experience now for a first time in a long time, and some people that maybe are first time that they're experiencing this with their families because they've never really been through something like this, where they have spent so much time with their family. And I'm sure after a week, some people are ready to pull the hair out of their heads, or open the bottle.
There
right?
You go.
Right. So make sure you go to the store and get some quality stuff. Right. But I think they may be experiencing some revelation that the quality of their life, how they used to define it, which is basically, I work till I'm, all hours because I'm providing for my family. It's almost a cliche. Like, that's not really rewarding life. You're killing yourself. And, when you retire, you're basically going to do all the stuff that you want to do. And, it's almost like an old story. But they may actually be experiencing right now, forcefully experiencing a different kind of quality of living, quality of life. And
Sure.
They may decide, look, I am very seasoned. I know what I bring to the table. Companies are going to be very light in terms of, hands on deck. I'm coming in. I'm a multi-hat wearing person with a certain number of years of experience, have a lot of connections in the industry. A lot of my connections are still holding on because they're, again, also seasoned and whatever. You want me to come in and work for you. I'm going to negotiate 3 days in the office and 2 days remote, or vice versa. And that is going to be my benefits package. And so why? Because I have experienced that my quality of life is better if I spend more time with my family or at home. So that in itself, if you take it and you start unraveling it, that means, do I need a 2 or 3 car household? Do I need, things that would make my previous life and how my life work experience was? Do I still need those? Are the car dealers now going to kill themselves because they're selling a quarter or a third less vehicles every year? I mean, the domino effect of this is, it's not necessarily negative, is I think what you and I were talking about. Like, this is an opportunity to maybe stop. And the other thing is, there's not a lot of noise. Do you notice?
Right.
Like the hardest thing, I think, for some people is, wait a minute, I don't know if I can handle the silence and quiet. Right. It's like, what? No. And I remember when I went out on my own and I stepped away from corporate. One of the hardest things to get used to was the fact that you did not have that high energy, 24/7 creative, on the ball stuff going on all the time. And you had a lot of people around you that were operating in that same space. And so you fed off each other's energy.
Sure.
And then next thing you know, you're working at home or working remotely. And I was like, people were losing their shit the other day, excuse my French, but about working remotely. And I'm like, I've been working remotely for 20 years. Right. But I will admit that there are certain things that are societal, that are communal, that are difficult. And so.
Yeah, but look, there's going to be both sides of that, right? I mean, we're going to benefit from more quiet time and more alone time and more thought time, maybe. We won't necessarily have the interaction. We've got to be more efficient and plan that interaction. Maybe it won't be serendipitous like it can be when you're out and about. But, I think from the work at home and that split model of doing 3 days on, 3 days at home kind of stuff, I think for a lot of industries, and I think hotels is one of them, part of that is going to be demand-based as well. I don't need you here for 5 days a week. I actually probably can get your job done in 3 days.
Right.
And that, I think, is where it gets interesting too, because I don't know anybody that I've ever met in my entire life who actually works a solid 8 to 10 hours a day. Even those people that work 15, 16-hour days like we do in hotels, how efficient were you with that time? Could you have actually done that in half the time?
I've heard stories in the last week from people that the level of efficiency has gone actually up
Right.
with remote
Because it
work.
has to. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but also when you're working, you're working.
Right.
And even if you're not spending the 8 hours working, the efficiency of the work time that you are putting in towards work is there's less distractions, there's less phone calls coming in, people walk into your office, there's all of this stuff that is not necessarily self-induced. But yes, I've heard some stories that are kind of like almost fascinating. Like, yes,
Yeah.
actually, we have found that we are being more efficient. So you made a point in one of your episodes about maybe this time, right? About where just because it hasn't worked in the past,
Yep. Yeah, it's funny. I've been doing a bit of retro time as well and flicking back through some of these old episodes. And again, that was something from, I don't know, probably the first 20 or 30 or 40 episodes or something years ago. When to me, and it's a lesson I learned back in a hotel where I had a general manager who'd been there for 4 years. I'd come in as the number 2 of that property, and I'm throwing an idea on the table. And straight away he says, that won't work. We've already tried it. And I accepted this for the first, 3 or 4 times. I went back and everything was, we've already tried it. It's not going to work. It doesn't work. It fails. And then I decided to ask him one day, but when did we actually try it last time? And then it turned out that we tried it maybe 18 months ago or 3 years ago. And of course, the world changes so rapidly as it has now. And so those ideas that you put on the table, and I did an episode about this actually just a few days ago in relation to a comment that came up on one of the LinkedIn posts, is that it's time to flirt with stupid. It's time to throw out those crazy ideas. And it's time to put on the table things that used to be laughed out of the boardrooms and the corporate management offices. All of a sudden now people are willing to listen. And I think,
go ahead.
Sorry, go on.
No, go ahead. Finish your thought.
And I think it's part of, again, another post I did years ago was this idea of nobody gets fired for buying IBM. You're probably familiar with the saying that nobody got fired for buying IBM. And that's, I think, where spas in hotels have been for a long time.
And explain that a little bit. What do you mean by that exactly? How does it relate?
Well, the general manager who, right now, every spa in every hotel is basically the same. Yeah. Now, yes, there's some with fancier this and fancier that and different designs and some different treatments. But when you look at really what they're selling and what the core offering is and even what the core product is, the physical product, it ain't that different from one to another. Right. And the challenge with getting anybody to step outside of that, but going back, we look at that and say, well, how efficient is that actual business? How much money is that spa making? How much profit is it generating? How utilized is the space? And we realize it ain't necessarily optimized. Let's say it nicely. It's maybe suboptimal at this point. So how do you get people to change? The problem is nobody got fired for buying IBM refers to any hotel GM who puts in a spa exactly the same as the spa next door and it doesn't work that great. He's not going to get fired because he's basically done what everybody else is doing. He's done industry standard, industry practice. He's bought the IBM. Now, if he buys an Apple Macintosh and it doesn't work 40 years ago, whatever it was, then he's an idiot because he basically has taken a gamble and taken a risk on something that wasn't proven. Mm-hmm. And in this case, the
IBM, the buying of the IBM, what you're saying is it's almost standardizing the mediocrity. Of course. Yeah. Like trying, and because you're an early adapter, and you buy maybe like an Apple, but everything around you is basically not IBM or IBM clone. Yeah, you're basically putting a target on yourself or spotlighting the fact that you're behaving differently from the herd.
Correct. Yeah. And if it doesn't work, you're in trouble. And if you do the normal thing that everybody else does and it still doesn't work, well, that's okay. We didn't ask you to be a creative genius. We asked you to run the hotel. We asked you to run the spa.
You know what I find most fascinating about that, Trent, is that we live in a world that things like, blue ocean and red ocean, mm-hmm. and business theories of that nature, disruptor, entrepreneur, I think we throw these labels around, but we really don't understand that a lot of those labels come with one thing. You have to be willing to let go strategically and calculatedly, but let go of the safety of the edge of the pool.
Yeah.
that you cannot pretend to be swimming in the and navigating, uncharted waters while you're holding with your big toe maybe or whatever to the edge of the pool. You cannot. There is no way to cast off onto uncharted waters and still have the rope basically tying your ship to the dock. It doesn't work that way, and it's fascinating because we gravitate towards these books, Blue Ocean, Red Ocean. Anybody who doesn't know that, you should go look it up, right? Innovation, storytelling, all of this stuff. Authentic. We use words like authentic, uncurated, original. And we wrap ourselves in these things, and then we do exactly what we have done for the last, we continue to buy IBM.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, I think, again, it comes back to human nature.
Safety.
It comes back to a risk-averse personality, a risk-averse culture, which I think most people are. People don't necessarily like change. The funny thing about it, though, is that the sort of gambles and risks and innovative approaches that I talk about, I don't think they're that risky. I say to hotel GMs all the time, why don't you just shut your spa down for 3 months? See what happens. See how your occupancy levels change in your hotel. Mm-hmm. See what happens with your food and beverage outlets. See what happens with all your sundry income. Has it really changed that significantly? Mm-hmm. And chances are it hasn't for most hotel spas, whether they're city or resort. Resort's obviously a little bit of a higher reliance on the spa offering.
Yeah.
But if you could afford, and you just put a sign up and say it's under renovation.
Right.
And if you can do that for 3 months and not have any real risk to your business, then what's stopping you blowing up that model and starting completely again and doing something completely different?
Well,
there's nothing.
No, and it's not. And I remember I had an opportunity to speak as a part of a 2-person. I didn't know this gentleman that I was going to share the presentation time with, but I talked to him the day before, and we had an opportunity to actually address a body of students at the graduate level at Cal State Fullerton, locally here at Center for Leadership. Mm-hmm. And what was fascinating is the gentleman that I was talking to, who was sharing the stage with me, he was younger. He had built a couple of companies. He was just very approachable. They didn't have any chip on his shoulder, right? And the conversation was very fluid, very free-flowing. In fact, I think the students were kind of shocked that it wasn't basically, here's the bullet points of what you should do in terms of a business manual, right? Mm-hmm. It was more philosophical. It was more sort of soul touching. And in that way, I think very true to sort of an entrepreneurial spirit. Like, I think sometimes we throw the word entrepreneur out there, but in my mind, entrepreneur and risk taker are synonymous. You cannot be one without being the other. And it doesn't mean that you're being foolish or, but you cannot be risk averse and be an entrepreneur. You may have been an entrepreneur and then stop being risk averse. You are no longer an entrepreneur. Now you are a cog in the machinery that you have built yourself. Right. But the interesting thing was he said something and it stuck with me. I used to say, and this is something I actually saw written on a brick wall one time when I was taking a black cab from Heathrow Airport to Maida Vale on a trip, business trip to London while I was at Hirschbedner in Atlanta. And I was driving, and I don't know if I really saw it or not, but it might have been jet lag, it may have been lack of, coffee, too much of these maybe on the plane. I don't know, right? But I could swear
By the way, this is a madman lunch, right? Come on.
Yes, come on. Can I get some more of this?
Sorry, go on. The black cab.
Yeah. So I remember, it's a very typical sort of British corner house, red brick, wall, right? Yep. And somebody had graffitied on the wall, and I don't know if there was more to the sentence or not. Cheers. It said, "Dare to be." Now, I don't know if there was something after the B part or not, but all I remember, and I wrote it in a book that I can't find anymore. It was like one of those little notebooks. Dare to be. Mm-hmm. And for the longest time, I held onto that on a very subconscious level and conscious level as being almost like a mantra.
Yeah.
Right. And here I am sitting with this guy, and he says to me that in his mindset of being an entrepreneur, we need to basically ask ourselves and encourage others to develop the muscle to ask themselves the following. and it's not so much an ask as a commitment and a statement. Why not?
Mm.
Why not? Like to your point, you suggested something to somebody. No, we've tried it before. Okay, why not? Like you a lot of times when people tell you no, they never even tell you the reason why they're telling you no. It's almost sometimes feeling based, or they tried it and it didn't work for them when they tried it, so therefore now it's a shut case and they'll never try it again, right?
But why, mummy? But why, mummy? But why, mummy? But why, mummy? There's a reason why kids learn. They learn because they ask mummy why, and they don't stop until they get an answer they're happy with.
Well,
it's the same. It's
why
or why not?
So what happens to us, Trent? Where do we lose the why mummy part? Because we're not, as an industry, we're not, as people in most cases, we're not saying why mummy. Because if we were saying why mummy, and mummy couldn't basically justify why, we would basically be looking at things maybe slightly differently. You are a big proponent of benefits too, right? Like, I mean, people don't, customers don't buy features, they buy benefits.
Yeah, it's about the benefit to me. I mean, we're great, and spas are great at this as well, right? We're great at selling our wonderful features. And funnily enough, a couple of years ago when I think I wrote that post, I was talking about how a simple thing like cleanliness and hygiene in a spa is not really one of those features that you want to promote. It's not really a benefit to me. It's just a feature because I expect that it's table stakes that your spa is going to be clean.
It's a minimum requirement.
It is, until there is an outbreak of salmonella in the jacuzzis in the city or something like that. All of a sudden, that
standing water in pedicure chairs, right?
All this stuff, right? I mean, this becomes an issue now that you need to promote that particular feature because the benefit to me is now that I'm going to be safe. But I think, generally, we don't do a great job of talking about our benefits. You only have to look at a spa menu, and it's really all about the features of the spa. It's the features of the hotel. It's the features of the menu, not the tangible benefits. And people also buy outcomes. They don't really buy what you're selling. They don't buy your product or your service. Right. They buy the outcome. So how does it make me feel? After I eat, how do I feel? After the massage, how do I feel? After that hotel check-in, what have I got? It's the outcome to me. It's not what you're selling, your individual product or service. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to get your head around exactly what that is. But that's, I think, sort of where the magic lies.
But if you're not getting your head around what that is, then you're not really providing anything other than that mediocre sort of...
Well, you're going to be found out. You're going to be found out in a time where people have choices, not just in a time of economic crisis, but in a time of boom. Right. In a time of boom when I've got the choice between one hotel and another, then I'm going to choose the one that gives me the best choice. The opportunity for hotels, I said this a couple of years ago too, to be in the gig economy. We talked about the food delivery services and and your massage on demand. Mm-hmm. Why the hell isn't Marriott the number one food delivery service in the world? Blows my mind why that doesn't happen.
That's a good question.
Because they've got a massive global footprint. They've got the skills and the resource in the kitchen. Mm-hmm. They've usually got capacity as well. Mm-hmm. And if not, they could build more capacity. Mm-hmm. And they've usually got capacity in terms of labor. Again, if not, they can bring them in.
Right.
So how the hell did they let Grab Foods in our part of the world, or Uber Eats, or Food Panda, whatever the business is in whatever country? How did the hotels let that happen?
Which is technically a food and beverage and hospitality product.
Any service that a hotel offers, in my mind, could have given them the opportunity to win the gig economy in that space. Mm-hmm. Housekeeping. Why isn't Hyatt the number one domestic cleaning service in the world? Mm-hmm. Why isn't, I don't know, pick another chain. Why isn't...
No, what I mean? It's brilliant because this is exactly the kind of stuff that that causes you and I to have these conversations. You're saying this, and I'm thinking, and yet ironically, these properties are where people go and stay, and then they come back from their vacation and they tell me they want their bathroom and their living room and whatever to be hotel-like. Some of the brands, even like Weston, with the heavenly bed and things of that nature. They started selling products that provided a continuation of that experience on their property to people, right? So you can say, well, Weston is in the furniture business. Yes, because that is a continuation, right? And I'm always fascinated by how little that gets embraced. Like, there was a reason why that worked. The bed, the sheets. I mean, people can't buy that. So when they come to me, it's like, oh, no, I want this kind of tread count. No, this is not the mattress that I got. I want this. So to your point, you're absolutely correct. Like, how is it that did not become the case? Like, what was it that stopped those companies from branching into those industries or those sectors?
But see, just on that conversation about taking the stuff home, taking the robe and the bed and the linens and the cutlery and the crockery, whatever else. When I say taking it home, I mean actually buying it as opposed to literally stealing it.
I have no idea. I don't have multiple robes in my cabinet.
There you go. In fact, side point, I'll come back to that in just a second.
Okay.
There was a hotel in Perth years ago when I was working there. It was shutting down. They were basically going to knock the building down. As you checked into that hotel, you paid $200 a night for that hotel room. You can take whatever you can take. You can rip the TV out. You can take the bed. You can rip the light fittings out. You take it all because the hotel's closed in a week anyway. Brilliant model.
Yeah, brilliant. Clearance sale and a unique experience, and they got a heck of a lot of publicity for it.
Correct. Great idea.
Yeah.
But to me, and that's what happened when a few years ago, Hyatt bought Miraval, right?
Mm-hmm.
The wellness company. And they've since had a couple of other acquisitions. They've hired Mia Krikos, of course, who's a super smart wellness person. So they've made wellness a real big part of their business.
Yeah.
And I said, when Miraval first got purchased by Hyatt, to me, that was an opportunity for Hyatt to become a true lifestyle brand, which I think is where hotels have missed the boat. Mm-hmm. Because just taking a bathrobe home or taking the bed home, yeah, you're part of my day-to-day, but you're not really part of my life as such. Mm-hmm. Wellness is something, again, if we accept what wellness is as something we live and breathe every day, once you're doing wellness every day, then that's part of my life. Then you're part of my existence. You become a true lifestyle brand at that point. Mm-hmm. And to me, the acquisition of Miraval really gave Hyatt the chance, and they still might get there, to become a true lifestyle brand, which I think, like I said, many hotels, no hotel to my mind has managed to achieve that, even those Amman type resorts.
And there's been other people that have kind of dipped their toe in that. I mean, you can say Canyon Ranch, you can say Golden Door, you can say Red Door. There's been a lot of them that have dipped their toe in that. Sometimes I wonder whether it's just so much more of requires a little bit more of a nimble, like genuinely entrepreneurial approach to fuse that into a larger brand, that the bureaucracy gets in the way is what it comes down to. Because you're right. I mean, if I am going to be a person that goes to, let's say, Miraval, or let's say I go to whatever, right? And my experience is such, and that's positive, and it's something I want to continue, I would continue to be attached to a source of expertise when it comes to that I'm trying to do, whether it's wellness, and then, okay, so then wellness dives into food and beverage and dietary. It becomes a pick up meals pre-ordered from your local hotel in a nice little bag with branded insignia, and
every element of your life.
Every element of your life starts being infused, and it's interesting that they have not done that, and yet so many have dipped their toe. So when you say they might get there, I don't know.